Hi everybody, welcome to another video. So today we're having a look at the Devilbiss DV1s and we're trying out the S1 and S2 caps to see how much of a difference there is and what kind of a finish it can give. Now these two caps both fit the 1.0, 1.2 and they now do a 1.4 tip. So if you've got normally when these guns were new they came with two tips, so normally 1.0 and 1.2. If you got one that came with a 1.0 and 1.2, you can get the 1.4. It fits the cap still fits it, and the needle fits it as well. All you need is the tip. I say all you need. I haven't actually got hold of one yet because the tips are really expensive. They're about 85, 90 quid to buy. And I haven't come across any 1.4 second hand yet, because you can buy these as a kit with 1.2 and 1.4 now. Whereas when I bought this, you couldn't, which is how I would have probably bought it, is 1.2 and 1.4 to be fair. But I'm using the 1.0 tip in this. It's the same for both. So just allow, when you see the size of the patterns, etc., just increase it by a bit more for the bigger tips. I've also just got a DV1s with the micro cap with a 0.7 and a 0.9 tip, because I really like the micro SRI Pro Light, or Pro Light S as it's now called, which is a 0.6 with a what they call a micro cap. Got very small air holes, very low air consumption, and really fine atomization. Very, very good guns. I've literally just got the DV1. I was using a DV1S with the smaller tips, and I was using it yesterday to do some repair work on a bumper. I was doing some silvers. And these guns they're very fine atomization and very fine spraying, so they're very good for blending. So if you've got a part panel repair, they're very good for applying the base coat and fading it out effectively so that you can't see the repair. So I was using it for a bumper I was doing, which I have got a video of, and I will put it up, but it's more of the repair of the bumper as well as the spraying, so it's not just about the DV1s. But as I say, looking at these two anyway, the S1 and the S2, what I didn't realise is that the micro cap, the actual tips are different as well. I know they're different in size wise on the micro, but the actual cap is different as well. The size of the centre hole is smaller, so you can't buy a micro cap and use it with the 1.0, for example, that I'm using here. You have to buy the 0.7 or 0.9. You'll see me there using a microwave. Apologies to people that watch the videos regularly, but I will just say it again just quickly. I'm sure it's not a done thing and it's not recommended to do, so I'm not recommending you do it, but it is what I do, and it does help, in my opinion. It helps the clear coat flow out better. I put a link in the description to a video that shows the difference between heated and unheated clear, and you'll see how much more viscous it is when it's cold, basically. So it gets a lot thinner when it's warmer, and it just allows the clear coat to flow out better, so you get a flatter finish, which is what most people actually want. So going back to these two caps, the S1 and the S2, we're starting off with the S2 cap. Now both of these are described as HVLP, although I question that really. Maybe the S2 cap is HVLP, but I can't see that the S1 cap is HVLP, because it just doesn't the air holes aren't particularly big, and it just doesn't seem to use a huge amount of air for a HVLP. But I'm only going by what I'm told by Devilbiss. When you look at the Devilbiss literature, both of them, or both of the caps, when you look at them, say HVLP, but I would question it about the S1. Maybe the S2 is. But both of these use more air than the SRI Pro Light or the Pro Light S. So if you've got a TE5 cap on your Pro Light S and you've got a HV5 cap, which is supposedly the HVLP cap, both of those actually use less air than the S1 cap. the S2 cap uses more air than the S1. So I would estimate that I think Devilbiss quote about 4.5 CFM for the S1 cap. I reckon it's probably about 5.5, and for the S2 I reckon it's about 6.5. Definitely a noticeable difference. If you're using the ProLite S with, say, a TE5 cap, which is the cap that uses the least air, I think it's 3.5 Devilbiss claim for the TE5 cap. I actually had one measured and it's 3.8, so it's not that far out, but it is a bit more than they say, which tends to be the way with most manufacturers. They tend to get ideal conditions to measure it. I'm not saying they measure it wrongly, they just use ideal conditions to measure it. So you get maybe a little bit of a rose-tinted view of its air consumption. But certainly the S1 uses less air than the S2 by about 1.5 CFM. What you also find with the S2 is, as you can see there, the pattern, or you will do when you see the S1, the pattern is actually a bit bigger on the S2. And that would make sense because the normal way of using these guns, or the recommended way of using these guns, would be an S1 for clear coat and an S2 for base coat. That's how you would normally run these two. As I say, normally it would be HVLP, which I class as the S2 for base coat, and the S1 would be equivalent to the Transtech, the TE5 cap on the ProLite S, and you would use that normally for clear coat. And the reason for that is that the patterns are subtly different. With the S2, which you saw just now, when you see the S1 coming up in a minute, you'll see that it has a much, well, not much more, but a more center weighted pattern, slightly smaller, and it's that more center weighted pattern that is wetter, that lends itself much better to applying clear coat. Now the clear coat I used on this, what have I got, was U-Pol 2080, so it's only a cheap clear coat, so it doesn't do either of these cap and tip combination a favour really, because it just doesn't flow out particularly well. But it's fair because you're obviously pitting one against the other and under the same conditions. But with a better quality clear coat, you would get better results. Although the results come out pretty well. I will say that I was a little bit hesitant. Normally I use a couple of panels to do these side by sides, or two tanks exactly the same, so that trying to keep everything the same. But I thought I'd try it a bit differently this time and actually take the tank off so that you got one side or the other. And of course, one of the drawbacks with that is you need to allow the clear coat enough time to dry. So effectively, you can't do it under exactly the same conditions on the same day. So I did one day and one the next day. So everything was as fresh in my head as I could. But I thought it'd be more striking to see it side by side. As it is, you can't actually see much of a difference, although the S1 is definitely easier to paint with. But what I was saying about sectioning off the tank into two parts, another thing is it was slightly peely where I got to the tape, because I was worried about the clear coat blowing underneath the tape, because it's only it's a combination thing of masking tape and protective film, plastic film that I've got. And it doesn't take particularly well, and I thought at the time, be careful not to get it underneath, because obviously if I got it underneath it would make the other side look bad. I was trying to keep it even. Anyway, the upshot of it is that where it gets near the tape, it's just a little bit peely, where I was a little bit worried to put too much on, but the rest of the tank is fine and represents quite clearly what the caps can actually do. But what doesn't actually show, when you look at both of these, when you see at the end and you look at both of these, both of them look really, really good, and they are both really, really good, as you would expect with a 360 GB pound gun. That's about 450 US dollars. So it's a fair old chunk of money, so you would expect both of these to perform really well, which they do. But what you don't notice is the S1 cap is actually much easier to apply clear coat. But I've had this gun with both of these caps for probably the last year, maybe a little bit more. And what you do notice is that the S2 is, I mean, both of them are good with base coat, but the S2 is just, it's just a little bit subtly different. And I find it probably better, and I think it's because it has a slightly bigger pattern with the same size tip in it. It has a slightly bigger pattern, and those that have used the DV1s with a 1.2 will know that it's a huge pattern. But with an S2 you get a huge pattern, and it's less usable for clear coat, but it's more useful for base coat. So it actually blends just that little bit better. But I mean, we're really splitting hairs here. When people ask me to you know, what's the difference between this and that, it's not a huge difference between these things. It's just a subtle difference. The manufacturers do make them slightly different, but it is quite subtle, and most of the time it's very, very hard to tell. It's only literally doing things back to back, where you go from one and then to the other, everything's fresh in your head, and you think, no, that is a bit different. And with the case with this, because it was clear coat, the temperature was more or less the same. It was about 19 degrees on both days. Clear coat was heated up to the same temperature, which is about 34 degrees Celsius. It's just a subtle difference between the S1 and the S2, but it is actually there. As you can see, the results are, it looks really, really good anyway, because it's a black, and blacks just look really good if it's a relatively flat finish. But obviously this is directly off the gun. What you see outside is actually 2 days later. One of the things you'll find with